Welcome to Fatherhood Unscripted.
The show where real dads have real conversations about the highs, the lows, and the in-betweens of being a father.
We're here to laugh, learn, and grow as men committed to showing up for our families, our kids, and ourselves.
Today's episode is a powerful one. We're joined by Chris McKenna, founder of Protect Young Eyes, a ministry-minded organization that's equipping families to navigate the digital world with wisdom and intentionality. Chris opens up about his own story, the dangers of early tech exposure, and what it really takes to build digital trust in our homes. If you've got kids, you're online, or if you're a dad trying to lead with purpose, this one's for you.
This is not where I expected to be in life. I don't know how many of the dads or parents listening to this can relate. I call that this was my plan, comma, but God. And we have all kinds of those little detours, maybe more than one. I happen to have a couple. So yeah, so protectyoungeyes.com. I'll refer to that. That's a website that would be the destination for folks who have questions, right? How to have conversations, how to set up accounts, how to set up devices, right? We want to stand in that gap between amazing families, parents that are trying to do the right thing, and stand in that gap between them and technologies that were not designed with their amazing kids in mind. They weren't designed with humans and are thriving in mind. They were designed with humans in mind, but not with our thriving in mind. And that's sort of how we came to be. So in May here, and folks will be listening to this at different times, but in May of 2025 here, we will be about 10 years old as a website, which I never expected to be doing this now full time. My journey, guys, was I was a business guy. I have an accounting degree. I worked in business consulting for Ernst & Young for 12 years. That was until 2009. The Lord called me into ministry. And so I went from traveling the world and publicly traded companies to junior high youth pastor, because they're identical. They're like the same. And I did that from 2009 to 2016, just a total change, right? In terms of lifestyle and kind of the role I had in income and all the things, but stepped out in faith, and the Lord was faithful to us during that time. But if you think about that time frame, right, 2009, 2016, that is when we decided it was a good idea to put 100 million people in kids' pockets and make it portable, right? We all believe the lie from Steve Jobs in 2007 when he rolled out the iPhone, that putting everything that was entertaining to a human brain was a good idea in one place. And we live in the wake of that invention here, now a decade and change later. But I watched that, and that terrified me. So I started doing some research for my families, put a Facebook group together, and that led to the launch of the website. And now 10 years later, thousands of presentations later, I have a team of presenters who travel the world. I testify at the federal and the state level, consult with companies and legislators on how to create bills that work, that will stand up to both the opposition and constitutional challenges, and try to tackle all those different layers in society. I know many listening, you're in that family layer, right? That's a critical layer, and we want to equip. But there are multiple layers that surround our children. There's the places of worship layer, the school layer, the policy layer, and the companies themselves. And we have efforts in all of those. And, we'll probably have a chance to unpack this a little bit. And I'm guessing that many listening to this will be able to relate, but kind of underpinning all of that was an early childhood exposure to pornography, which led to compulsive use of pornography as an adult, which led to a supercharged motivation with Protect Young Eyes to prevent all of these amazing young people that I was working with into becoming the 12-year-old version of me. So that's what underpins all of that. I used Covenant Eyes and Christ and accountability for years to bust free from that. And then, years later, that's what I watched us put in kids' pockets. So that terrified me, right? Got rid of that monster, and then we put the monster in the pockets of our kids. So that's the story of Protect Young Eyes. I'm only about a year and a half into doing it full time. After a little bit of a stop at Covenant Eyes, I used it, and then I went to work there for a little while after ministry, and now I'm doing this full time. So there's the story.
Awesome. Yeah, DJ, he's been talking recently about how he's kind of being called to full-time ministry. So we've talked about that a little bit. It's a decision,
Bit of a jump.
Yeah.
Going from the corporate world into full-time ministry. I don't know what the timeline looks like, but it's like a little nagging thing that you have. Like, come on, this is what I called you to. I'm
Yeah.
not going to really like push you, but I'm going to guide you in that direction. And so,
Right.
yeah, it's kind of cool. Like I can relate to, and I have a big heart for youth. Like that's been something that's like, I feel like that might be like Jasmine, my wife, and I feel like we'll end up being like family pastors
Sure. Yeah.
eventually. But yeah, no, it's definitely something that I can relate to. I can even relate to. I know you kind of brought up the whole having a phone and having access to a lot of things, including pornography, and that actually, having access like that is like, I was in middle school, I believe it was, when somebody came up to me with a phone. They were on an inappropriate website and they brought it and showed me what they were watching. And
Right.
from that point
Wow.
on, it was like the gateway into me using it as an escape, because I just was in childhood just felt completely unsafe. And
Yeah.
the either you turn to something, whether that be substance abuse, or you know you go to something else like pornography, where it is an addiction in and itself, and you find that escape. And so I could definitely relate to that. And you're right, we live in a scary world, that you can just in 2 seconds pull up something very quickly and have access to it. And this is what is, like you said, been given to our kids, and it's
Mhm.
starting younger and younger. I feel like, I don't know if you have any stats to kind of back that up, Chris, but
It is. And there's different places to look for statistics. Some say 8, some say 9, some say 11. What I tend to say to parents and listeners or someone in an audience is, let's just agree it's too soon.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that it really matters that it's 8 or
no.
9 or 11. Let's just agree that 8, 9, and 11-year-olds should not be exposed to that content just because of what you said, right? It's too much too soon. It's the wrong time. I have a friend who works in family therapy. He's been in it for decades. And he talks about the brain having a schedule by which you receive information and when you're ready to receive and process certain information, right? So
Mm-hmm.
think of a brain kind of like a file cabinet, and there are files that get put in that cabinet once you have certain experiences or certain education. So parents will sit down and talk to you about something to give you some guidance and direction in an area.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have a file that has a name of whatever you were talking about that you can put things in related to that, so you have context for how to understand it. And the problem with pornography is it often happens outside of context too much too soon, ahead of schedule. So kids don't have a file. They don't have any sort of reference to put it. And because it's such a supercharged neurochemical beast, it creates confusion and trauma. I've had parents tell me that their kids started having nightmares out of nowhere, and they didn't know why. They couldn't figure out why. And they kind of ended up putting pieces back together, and they found out that this child had been exposed to something shocking and explicit online. And it created this sort of trauma to this child that when it came to a quiet, dark time to go to sleep, they just couldn't settle down. It was information ahead of schedule for their brain, and it caused them to be traumatized. So it's a big deal. It's everywhere. And at the same time, I don't want us to be fearful or,
Right.
freak out when it does happen. I think every
Mm-hmm.
child can recover from those kinds of things if we step in the right way with the right approach. And that's other tactics that we work on with parents. In fact, I'm writing a book right now. Maybe I'll get to podcast with you guys when that comes out next year. And I'm working on the chapter right now related to some of those reaction practices that we need to have as parents in the digital age around freaking out and what that means and how that destroys digital trust and right, those kinds of things. So it's so important to respond correctly.
Mm-hmm. And I think so DJ's kids are a little bit younger still, so they're not all into like the digital stuff yet. Like my kids are at that age now. Well, they both have they're both, oh, when do we get a phone, Dad? When do we get a smartwatch and all this stuff? Like, listen, man, I didn't have one until I was like 15, so we can wait. Like, you don't need that right now.
Yeah.
Like they have the Switches, the Nintendo video games.
Yeah. My boys
but
see
like
too.
they can't get online with that. They can't talk to other people with that. So and we do regulate it a lot. But yeah, I'm not ready for phones in my kids' hands yet. With what we do and stuff, I had people reach out to me a couple weeks ago, and they were like, "Hey, would you want to review this kid's smartphone?" I was like, no, we're good. Like my 9-year-old doesn't need that. I'm not making videos of my kid playing on the phone just to have a phone, for free. But yeah, no, I like what DJ was talking about. When I was young too, when I was first introduced to pornography, and it actually happened. I used to work with my dad after school at church, and I had a friend that came to the church with me, and he was like, "Hey, can I show you something?" And pulled it up, and then from there on, it became a thing. And so it happens so fast, like you said, like, and it sometimes it's not even in the home. Sometimes it can just be like that one person that it comes out of nowhere, and
Right.
you kind of have to regulate that. And so as parents, we have to kind of like be on top of it too, because it could happen while they're at school, and you never know, because they might not say anything, because I was definitely scared to tell my parents, like, hey, this is what I looked at, and I was at church.
For sure. Yeah, it was
So,
at church, right?
Mm-hmm. So, it's really cool what you're doing. What was my question? I had a question a second ago. I wrote it down. Kind of moving forward, I did see like you were part of the Childhood 2.0 documentary.
I was. Yeah, that was a great experience.
While going through that, just seeing what life and stuff that just happens, and it, like I said, things happen so fast with, sex trafficking and all the stuff in the world. And you talk to these random people, and there's such perverted people out there that's all they look for is, what way can I get into this child's life? What way can I do this or that? Can you kind of speak on the Childhood 2.0 documentary?
Yeah, sure. That was a real honor to be a part of that. I'm pretty close with the leadership at Bark Technologies, the software company, and to Tanya Jordan, who's the chief parent and marketing officer there, and then Brian Basin, who's the founder and CEO. They asked me to be a part of that. And of course, I was honored to do that. And the documentary is broken up into different chunks of content, right? It talks about pornography, it talks about addiction, it talks about mental health, and wants to just share science. And there's a lot of other people that are interviewed as a part of this, some really knowledgeable individuals that are sharing, but one of the, I think, warmest parts about it is it keeps sort of flashing back to this older woman who is sharing about her childhood and what it was like to grow up during the Depression and just the difference. And, this isn't me trying to say that we all have to pack it all up and get off the grid and become Amish or anything like that. But I do think she reminds us of some of the innocence that lasted longer in childhood than what we have today. And I think that's something that is maybe not discussed quite enough. I mean, we all know that pornography is bad. We know that trafficking is bad. We know that, addiction is bad. But, what we have, and it kind of goes back to this idea of too much too soon. The reason for that is, right, technology is all about information sharing. It's about content being shared. It's about my thoughts and ideas getting out to as many people as possible. It kind of turns all of us into a little mini Walter Cronkite. We're all publishers. We're all newscasters. We all have this platform and this stage that we never used to have. What that means is you're always connected to a million people with a platform and a stage. And so I think what that tends to do is it tends to turn 8-year-olds into 15-year-olds, and it tends to turn 20-year-olds into 15-year-olds. It pushes both of them in the wrong direction. So it over matures because it accelerates maturity because of the content that you're seeing for our younger kids. That's that kind of adage of too much too soon. And I just think that really hypersexualizes kids, right? I hear stories all the time from principals and teachers, elementary school teachers, who will talk about 3rd, 4th graders who are moaning in class and making all kinds of inappropriate sexual noises because that's what they're hearing on TikTok and YouTube when they're at home the night before they come to school, right? So that's that, turning 8-year-olds into 15-year-olds. At the same time, especially for our boys, because of the triple G engine of girls, gambling, and gaming, what it does to 20-year-olds is it permanently locks them into childhood, because these are all the things that cause them not to become men. It causes them not to launch into a job because they have no attention span. Because honestly, a massive online player video game is so much more entertaining than working on a project at work. Of course, neurologically, of course it is, right? Yep. The loop and the reward system that's in place there is crafted to be engaging, right? The project to implement an ERP system on my job is not crafted for engagement. It's crafted for implementation and business. It's not engagement. So of course it doesn't hit the same. And I think that's what we're probably on the verge of, is greater than insignificant number of unhireable Gen Alpha young men and young Gen Z men who don't know how to focus on life and mature in the way that they need to in order to become productive members of society. And that's the kind of stuff that doesn't show up on graphs, right? Mental health graphs, when it comes to teenagers, it's easy to see that girls are suffering because they feel things faster, and they'll self-report that they feel bad because it's impacting their relationships. It's all about the feeling of the relationship and the connection. The things that I just described with boys, girls, gambling, and gaming, boys self-report they feel great because those three things make you feel great. So when it comes to asking them questions about mental well-being and how you're doing and do you feel worthless, no, I got all the video games and porn I want. I feel great, right? And so they do self-report some change in their happiness. But I mean, at the end of the day, the harms we're talking about with boys are long tail. These are things that are going to show up more macro in terms of societal impacts and hiring and attention fragmentation, which is a phrase that Jonathan Haidt is starting to use quite a bit more if folks are familiar with his writing in The Anxious Generation. So those are the kinds of things that I think about in terms of some of the differences between boys and girls, some of the things we've observed, kind of the impacts that I'm seeing on both sides of that. So
you kind of talked about, sorry, dude.
Go ahead.
You talked about we could just get on that track of it's too soon. I saw a video yesterday or the day before, and it was a dad talking to the mom about, hey, we have video games in the house, or we have this in the house. And he's like, do it every other day and don't allow it every day. Do you, or have you talked to people about regulating that in the house? Like if you want to start to introduce it, because I mean, with tech nowadays, tech is moving so fast. I think it can be used for good with kids if it's put in the right areas. But do you have you should do it once a week, or that kind of just regulation?
Well, so when it comes to those sort of, and trust me, as a CPA, I love hard and fast numbers. I'd love it if parenting was all quantifiable. And if you did a certain number of things on a certain day in a certain frequency, and your kids would, like an equation, turn out okay, man, that'd be awesome. But we are complex. Every human being is different, right? I have 4 children. I have a daughter who's a sophomore in college. Then I have 3 teen boys who are 15, and 13. And they couldn't be more different. There's the gender differences in my set of twins. I have fraternal twins, one born with Down syndrome, the other one not. So you talk about different there. And then their 13-year-old brother, who just 20 months later comes out of nowhere. He is radically different than the other 3. Aren't we the same parents? It's like, how the heck did this happen? But that's the complexity of genetics and the complexity of our experiences that shape us. And that's why it's not just hey, if you have children and you give them screen time and video gaming or whatever it is every other day, you can expect a consistent outcome. That's just not true. So I'm more a fan of, and this is harder. And granted, everything I'm about to say next is harder, but I'll say this with as much kind of grace, but direct grace as possible. This is just what it takes if you choose to have children in the digital age. Right? If you're going to have children today, there are certain more intentional, difficult things that we're going to have to do that are different than what our parents had to deal with. That's just the way it is. Okay. So if we get that out of the way, right? We can't compare to, what it was like to kick us out of the house back in the 80s and come back home when the street lights came on. That's just not the same as we are today, because of kicking outside and staying out till the street lights come on means the scenarios that you two just described, where somebody else has a device that your parents didn't know and they showed you something, and then we have the situations that you guys talked about. All right. It's a long-winded setup to answer what was a simple question. I am not a big fan of those kinds of patterns because I don't think they consider the unique vulnerabilities of our children. That's number one. And number 2, I think they lull us into over depending on the rule and missing signals, that we just get comfortable in the every other And that's the thing. And then we quit paying attention to some of the more nuanced potential impacts that it's having on our kids. So I tend to more just look at, and for younger kids, you can be a little bit more just direct and say, only here, only this time, and only for this much. And if you respond in a certain way, just understand that if you get mad when I take it away, whatever you're playing is gone for at least a day. And you teach them how to regulate. You understand for a little while that you maybe have to own some of that. If you want them to put the game down at 5 p.m., then at 4:50, you set a timer for 9 minutes and 55 seconds on the microwave and say, hey, I'm going to own part of this with you. You just have to bring it to me 5 seconds after that timer goes off. And then you tick that back to 9 minutes. Then you tick that back to 8 minutes. And you train them to kind of start to own some of that, to wind down and bring it to you over time. But then the older they get, I'm more a fan of looking at other attributes, like, are they getting their homework done? Are they keeping their room clean? Are they generally a pleasant human being that interacts with you? Do they talk to you at dinner, right? Are they keeping themselves clean in terms of like body hygiene and these kinds of things? If all of those things are in place and they want to play another hour of Super Smash Brothers on Saturday on the Switch, cool. As long as the other things are still in place too, where I'm going to say to them, yeah, go ahead and keep playing. And then a half an hour later, if you're like, oh, dude, I need you to help me move something real quick because it's too heavy for me. They know that they always have to put it down and listen to you. That's like always in place. That's a rule we have in our house, that if dad needs you, I'm going to interrupt you as minimally as possible. But if I do, know that it's important and you got to put it down now. I don't care if you've still got 60 seconds left in that 3-minute Smash game. You've got to put it down and talk to me now, or help me with this now. So, those are some of the things that are a little more nuanced. I want us to look at our kids. I don't think, all video games are evil, but I want us to be really, really careful with them because there are some young brains, particularly young boy brains, that have a sensitivity that is incompatible with today's video games in terms of their inability to regulate the use of them. So are you involved enough? Are you shoulder to shoulder? I want us to co-play with them. I want us to be with them. There are never games played in private, never in secret. It's always with us, right? Would you know if your boy or daughter was that type of kid? So there's a lot of nuanced and more subjective things that I shared in that, that are complications to what is a really easy question, right?
Yeah.
But again, that's an example of why I think it's just a more intentional need to parent in a certain way in the digital age.
Yeah, actually, that is something you brought up, was regulation. And my 4, almost 5-year-old, like before, like, you put on a TV show for him to watch, and he gets really upset when you turn it off, or it's done with 1 episode, or done after 2 episodes of the show. So we had to get to that point where it was like we tell him, okay, 1 more episode and then it's done. Yeah. And then he is now at the point where he's turning the TV off because he knows that it's like, technology's done. We're done for right now.
Yep.
And it used to be where he'd get super upset. So just like teaching him how to regulate, I think, is super important. And then I know you talked about just like boys in general, just like they feel like they're great, right? The older they get, the 3 Gs you were talking about, like they'll tell you they feel great. Maybe can you talk about maybe how do you create a safe place for boys to come to you to be able to share like truly, or be able to like kind of teach them how to truly understand what's going on underneath despite surface level feelings?
Sure. Yeah. I want to go back to one thing real quick related to video games. And then I totally intend to answer that question around those 3 Gs, or something I've just recently started using. So I haven't fully expanded all my thoughts on them yet, but it just helps my kind of CPA brain whenever I can come up with a framework or something like that, or, every sermon needs 3 points kind of thing. So I want to just backtrack one quick moment back to video games, because I want to draw parents' attention to the big three, talking about the big three: Minecraft, Fortnite, and Roblox. Okay. So those games, regardless of the strength of regulation, the intelligence of the kid, the whatever rules you have in place, those three games are always a little bit like playing with dynamite because they are so intensely engaging. So if you have a child who has access to those three games, or you're a parent who has said yes to those three games, I want us to be really, really careful. Those three, to me, carry a tremendous amount of risk. Roblox carries a tremendous amount of predatory risk. Fortnite carries a tremendous amount of addictiveness risk. And then Minecraft is just fun. Like even if you're in creative mode, you can't put it down because you want to keep digging. And on the surface, that seems okay, but it's just that I can't put it down and want to keep sneaking and playing. And sometimes what that can become is an off ramp to watching. Well, I'm not playing Minecraft, but I'm watching all these Minecraft players on Twitch or on YouTube who are playing Minecraft and building, and their language isn't great. So we got to be careful in those channels too. So it's sometimes an off ramp. So I want parents who have gamer kids, again, sons or daughters, or even if you're a gamer parent, remember how your modeling matters. Those three are really touchy when it comes to little brains. All right. Kind of plays a little bit into the 3Gs there because of the gaming aspect, right? But girls gambling and gaming and online gambling, I mean, I think that is a bit of a time bomb that is just waiting to go off among adult men, financially and in terms of our attention span, but also I think among teen boys, totally flying under the radar. When it comes to how do you create a family culture or an environment around those three things, I think what we say to parents is you have to talk about all the things that you're afraid of. You've just got to be honest and say to your teen son, because it's most often them, hey, I know that gambling is fun. I know you love sports. I'm afraid that if you get into it, that would be a really big problem. Here's what I'm afraid of. Here's some of what I've read. I mean, you say all the things you're thinking, and then you just kind of walk away. You don't need a huge response from them. They don't need to applaud when you're done. I think they just need to hear the things that you're concerned with so that you build little bridges of authenticity. We call that digital trust with our kids. And I think there are things we can do to create openness to them receiving those kinds of statements from us. There's an amazing author and speaker and psychologist. Her name is Dr. Lisa D'Amour. And she says that there are two superpowers when it comes to connecting with teenagers. Number one is frequent moments of agendaless presence. Frequent moments of agendaless presence. You're not asking them a bunch of questions. You're not into all kinds of complex things like we're talking about now. They're checking email on their Chromebook and you're sitting 3 feet away from them, also checking email on your MacBook. Your agendaless presence. They're in the car. You let them pick the music. Just no agenda, right? Whatever it is, you're simply physically close by. The other one that she talks about is a default mechanism. And we've been saying this for years too. And I'm glad that she agrees because she's a lot smarter than I am. So, is that our default response as parents, and she can't even think of a situation where this doesn't win, is empathy. Oh, I'm so sorry that happened. Oh, that must have been hard, right? There's almost never a situation where a child is in some sort of stress or situation or tension where that's not going to help them feel better. So if that's been our consistent posture with our kids, then I think we create a firm foundation on which we can say some of these other things where they don't think that there's an agenda or another, disappointed parent who's wagging a finger at them. It's just, man, I hope I genuinely care about your heart, buddy. I would take a bullet. I'd do anything for you. I've said that, to my boys. I just want you to know my motivation here can sometimes sound a little bit daddish, but ultimately it's because you are, and I said this, to them, and it works because of the number, right? I've got 4 kids and a wife. I'm like, you are part of the 5 most important human beings on earth to me. Like, I would do anything for you different than every other 8 billion out there. You are part of the 5 because they fit on one hand. And I need to hear those kinds of things behind the harder conversations so they know our true motivation. And then I think that gives us a runway to have some of the harder conversations. And it's persistently having them, right? It's dripping them throughout their lives. We don't have the luxury of one talk or even 5 talks. It has to be 50 talks because the algorithms are more persistent. What I use as an illustration, there's nothing new under the sun, guys. What I'll say is as old as the Old Testament, and it's in Deuteronomy 6:5-9, right after God gives the Hebrews the 10 commandments, the instructions he gives the Hebrews into how to teach children about God is to be a divine algorithm. We talk about God when we walk, when we lie down, when we wake up. We bind him to our arms, right? We stuff him in the door frames of the houses, which the Jewish people still do today. If you were to visit a Jewish home, as I have in Israel, you would see in the hinges of doors these little canisters that hold scripture. They took these verses very seriously. In other words, you inundate their lives with the things that matter, the things that are good and excellent and praiseworthy and that lead them toward holiness. These are the things we need to do persistently and consistently. And so, yeah, those are some of the things I would say. Again, I know I give long-winded answers to questions because I think the digital age demands a ton of nuance because it is a complex thing. It is built in a very complex way to do complex things to our honestly pretty simple brains, which crave novelty and crave entertainment. And they have figured out how to tap into that in us, that ancient wiring in us that I think is good when it comes to survival and relationships, but they've found a way to tap into that in very digital ways. So that's why it's more than just a sentence sometimes.
Well, it's almost like that adrenaline high. We see everyone else having a perfect life. And we're like, oh, I got to get it. But then when we don't get it, we're like, all right, I'm going to go watch and keep watching so I can just kind of be in their moment of their life and happy, So we've talked about in the past where it's kind of like that Amazon life where everybody wants it now and no one wants that time to do things anymore. And so I think that's something me and DJ have tried to do is limit the tech in the house, but also like still maintain, like from our kids, go outside, ride your bike, go hang out with your friends, like all this stuff. But like you said, we still got to have that attentiveness to where, okay, well, if they're going to go outside, cool. But we got to make sure who they're with around, what kind of stuff is around them, and make sure that things that are being put in front of them that we don't know about.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, definitely. Love it.
Yeah, I like that you talked about those 2 things, like the frequent moments of agendaless presence, and then the empathy, and that you brought those points up because, like, you're right. It starts with those being consistent, so they know that not everything is me trying to pry or me. It's just really wanting to have connection with them. Whatever you're doing, you do that. I'll do this over here. I just want to be close to you. And it kind of creates that safe environment because I would only imagine, as my kids get older, this probably will happen. But like when you're sitting there, sometimes they'll stop and they'll start talking to you about things that are happening in life because it's just like the moment was set to, if you want to talk about it, cool. Like I'll stop what I'm doing if you stop what you're doing and we'll have a chat. We'll talk through these things. And I even notice with my 4-year-old, so I work remote on Fridays. And so he's super excited. Every time he's like, is it Friday yet? Is it Friday yet? I want you to be home, Dad. So
Love it.
This morning, I brought my laptop into his room. And while he played, I was just answering emails or whatever. And he just wanted me to be in there. It wasn't like, so it's like, it's that craving of just being in the presence of each other. So I really like that you brought those up. And I think it is super important. And, have you experienced success with this in your own life with your kids?
Yeah, in fact, I joke, my poor kids, it must really suck growing up in the house where your dad runs an internet safety organization because you're subjected to all of my ideas. I don't know if this works. Let's try it. Hey, does it work to sit next to you while I'm working and you're watching TV? Dad, you're annoying. Just leave me alone. Right. So I'm constantly doing these kinds of things with them. And yeah, it's great. And that means the illustration you just gave where you're checking email and, I work hard. I've got a lot of things. I do a lot of work where after hours, because of the different time zones of folks that I'm working in, a lot of folks out West, sometimes spills into nighttime. I was on a podcast this week where the interviewer was in Hawaii. So of course, not only did I want to be there, but that meant the time was a lot later for me. Right. So, and it's announcing. So your example there, I think a real simple thing that we teach parents, we have a framework of what it takes to have a tech ready home, 5 habits in a tech ready home. And under the habit of modeling, we talk about announcing your tech intentions. What that means is you're telling kids when you're with them and on technology, just let them know what you're doing and why you're doing it. I think it lets them know that there are good uses and it just sort of takes away that they're ignoring me. It is good to be in their presence to say, hey, cool, while you're watching this show, I'm just going to go through some email, but it's not more important than you. If you need anything, just tap me on the shoulder, but I'm just going to be here next to you working on this. And I think it's really helpful just to be narrating what we're doing in something that is taking away from them so they know the motivation behind it again. It's just kind of that motivation thing. They're not wondering, can I bother dad right now? Oh yeah, he told me I could. Yeah. And then, you give them that permission, I think. So announcing your tech intentions when we're in those moments of agendaless presence and trying to get stuff done, I think can be a real powerful thing for kids to learn from and just know. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there are many parents listening to this who would shy away from an opportunity to remind your kids that they're more important than the stuff you're working on. It gives us a chance, to do that too. And I think sometimes it's a good reminder for us to hear it. Yeah, they are more important than this urgent email I'm working on right now. And if they do interrupt me, I'm going to prepare myself to put it down, just like I want them to put their game down. I'm going to prepare myself to put it down, square up, and give them my full attention. And I think those are all just things we need to practice as adults too.
Yeah, no, I like the announcing tech intentions. I forget who was saying it, John Delaney or somebody was on a video and they said, like, when your kid comes up and they like tap you on the shoulder or whatever, like, hey dad, I want you to play with me, or they want to ask you a question, like you're in the middle of answering an email or whatever. He said, stop what you're doing, look at them like in the eyes and say, if you give me 2 seconds, I just need to finish this quick thing up real quick. Like just get it out of the way. And then you have my full attention.
Yep.
And it's literally just having those conversations. Yeah.
That's right.
So I totally agree. And I'm actually seeing that, being the message that's out there in the world, which is great because it does tell your kids, you're more important. I just have a task I need to finish real quick. And so I can knock that out and give you my full attention because you are that important. I don't want to give you half attention. I don't want to give you a quarter of my attention. I want to give you the full attention. So
yeah, amen. I agree.
Well, it's kind of like I like that a lot of parents, what they'll do now is like your kids will be wanting to you're like, give me a minute. And then you don't say anything else to them. And then it just kind of gets brushed to the side. And that's when your kids feel like, oh, well, mom or dad doesn't want to do anything with me, So people, we talk about this a lot. I'm in the early stages of writing a book about how it's easy to be a hard parent. It's not. It's really hard to be a good parent. Like you have to be very intentional about it, And so that is, I think, the easy way out of it. Yeah, just give me a second. Like just go do something else. We'll talk in a minute, and just brushing off your kids, which sucks because if you're gonna have kids, why not have kids and be fully into it? Because it's one of the best things you could do,
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And do you think like announcing tech intentions and being very mindful of this will help you to, like you said, be aware of the signals as your kids get older versus being so focused on your own technology that you're missing everything else around you? Do you think that's probably one of the problems that we probably are facing and missing those signals?
Yeah, I think sometimes there's no question that we are distracted also. And I want us to be aware of that, mindful of our own tech distractions, mindful of when we use our own technology. This is why I'm a big fan of creating a family media plan where you sit down and decide as a family how technology is going to be used. You get opinions from the kids, you get opinions, you want a really humbling question, ask your kids what they think your tech rules should be as a parent. They have opinion. And maybe even preceding that, this is the part I've just been writing about, is maybe first is coming up with your values as a family, because the way in which you use technology should naturally fall out of those values. We create values as companies, do that all the time, right? These are our corporate values. It's how we make decisions. It's how we hire. It's how we work. And tactical things come out of those higher level values. And I think sometimes it's what that does as a family is it almost delegates a little bit of the bad guy to something else. If you've decided as a family that your values are accountability and connection and time together, or whatever they are, whatever you come up with, authentic time together, whatever the list is, you can delegate a little bit of it's time to kind of maybe put the switch away for a week because I just feel like we're not really connected right now. You kind of go, that value of being connected as a family, I feel like that's not really happening right now. It's a bad example, but you know what I'm trying to say is you can almost delegate a little bit of not that I'm saying we can be weak as parents. I mean, ultimately, we are the authority. We are the decision makers, and we have been ordained by this role to do this. That's not what I'm trying to say. But isn't it nice every once in a while to have other things that bolster that authority to say, hey, we sat down, we decided as a family, these were our values. And I feel like right now, this digital thing or this digital experience or app, whatever it is, it's getting in the way of that. We decided this was most important, and I can't stand that this is getting in the way of that. I want to do something about it. And I think that's a different posture. Then it's not just a transactional, I'm mad at you and put the game down. It's a relational, this thing is getting in the way of this important thing over here. Right. So those are some ways that I think that we can, help, in our role as parents in the digital age. Again, it's this abundance of transparency and discussion and putting it out there. We're not surprising our kids with punishments. We're not changing the screen time rules week to week and, being wishy-washy about it. We've discussed it. We've put it out there. If necessary, we've made a sign and we put it up somewhere. That same guy I talked about who gave me some of these words around too much too soon or ahead of schedule, he joked, kind of joking, not joking. He says, sometimes, Chris, if a parent that I'm counseling has a really difficult child and they're just not listening and things aren't working out, I'll tell the parents to type up some rules, print it out, and put it on a sign. There's something about putting something on a sign that makes it feel more important. And so you do it. He said, some kids, they'll listen to the sign. You put it up and these are the things you can point to the sign every once in a while. And I remember, do you remember the show with the nanny? She was like the super nanny who would go to houses and sort of fix houses, right? I was laughing the other day because she actually commented on one of my Instagram posts, something from the UK. And anyway, she did that all the time. There would be lists and bulleted lists and agreements and charts and all these things. There's something about writing it down and putting it on a sign that I think matters. So a lot of different sort of ideas there, but I just, as parents, I think these are some things that can, again, help.
Yeah. No, I agree. I like just sitting down and talking about your values and really honing in on that so that everybody has the same understanding when it comes to everything within the home.
Yeah.
Because you're right. It can become really wishy-washy real quick if you don't have those solidified and you've never talked about them.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we get in our heads like maybe we thought we talked about it or we thought, we had a discussion. But then to the kids, like, we never talked about this is like coming out of the left field. Like, what do you mean? Like, we were supposed to sit down as a family, every day for dinner. Like, we never talked about this. We never did this. And all of a sudden you're making it a rule. And so it's sitting down and getting everybody's feedback and makes everybody feel like they're a part of the family, which it should be.
Yeah.
And so I really like that. As we're almost on time here. one thing that we like to ask all of our guests is, if you could give one piece of advice to a new dad, a dad in the thick of it, a dad with older kids out at college, what would that one piece of advice be?
I spend a disproportionate amount of time in the live presentations that I do when I see a decent number of dads in the audience talking about our anger. And the reason that's important in the digital age, and it falls under, so the second part of our framework after the model the right behaviors habit is to pursue authentic connection. And I think one of the ways in which fathers sometimes stumble and disrupt and rupture that authentic connection, particularly in the digital age, is because of our anger. Dads have a unique position with our voice, sometimes our authority, our posture, to either be a strong anchor in a nasty sea of chaos and anxiety in the world for our kids, right? Or that same strength and authority and tone of voice can be a weapon in the lives of our kids. And the difference between those two is pretty thin sometimes. So I guess I want us to be aware of that. I want us to beg that the Holy Spirit would guide our words and our tone and our responses and our reactions so that they are consistently, and I know we're not perfect, but as consistently as possible, the posture of the father in the story of the prodigal son, right? Here's this Jewish boy who had just spent all the dad's money and is covered in pig slop. That's a really big deal if you're a Jewish son, right? Unclean. All dad cared about is the boy was home. That's it. Right? There'll be a time for correction. There'll be a time for figuring out what you did wrong. I'm just glad you're here. And I want that to be our consistent, again, back to that kind of empathy, but through a biblical worldview. I just think that's the example that we were shown. I think there's a reason that John in chapter 1 describes Jesus as grace and truth. Not truth, period. Not truth, then grace. Grace, then truth. I think that's a model for us as fathers. So pray into that, press into that, do whatever you can to correct that. Again, when it falls off track, I just don't know of many situations where anger toward our children is the appropriate response. I don't think I've ever run into a parenting situation where my anger compelled my children to become better. That's what I would say.
I love that. Yeah, because I felt that too. We all get mad at some points, and it doesn't help the situation. We can get loud, but it's not going to make our kids do anything better or faster. Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you for being on. Where can people find you if they want to look you up?
Website's a great spot. There's a start here part of the navigation, and that walks you through, again, 3 steps that you can take kind of right away. So go to protectyoungeyes.com. Even though I'm not a big fan of social media in the lives of our kids, we do use it for as much good as possible. And you can just find us at Protect Young Eyes on Facebook or Instagram. For dads listening to this, we have a full course, on-demand course that goes through these habits that I've alluded to, these 5 habits of a tech-ready home. Man, I'd love it if more fathers were going through that. There's a lot of what I call CTO moms, Chief Technology Officer moms in most houses that are doing a lot of the blocking and tackling when it comes to technology. Man, I want more dads in that role. So that's on our website. It has a cost. I don't want that ever to get in the way of anybody, but it's basically taking the live presentation that I do all over the world and I put it into 10 or 12 different video chunks, and that can be watched on demand. So that's another thing that, if possible, I'd love for men to go through that.
Yep. Cool. Well, again, thank you. Thank you for your time. And an honor having you on, sir.
Thank you, Alec. Great to meet you both. You too, DJ.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.